And now it's time for our media panel. Welcome back to Brian Edwards, who's been monitoring media in the Cook Islands, very nice, and listener columnist Bill Ralston. I'd like to open the media panel this morning with a clip from perhaps the most controversial New Zealand show for some time.
Hey, Nate.
Finally got my licence. Drive my gangster car.
We've just fallen in love with the wrong person, but we haven't.
Yes, let's look.
You've been waiting ages for these.
I like that one.
Congrats, babe.
Thanks.
Pretty proud of it.
It's the GC, of course, and its executive producer, Bailey Mackey, is with us in studio. Kia ora, Bailey.
Kia ora, Rachel.
Let's be honest about this program from the start. When it went to air, that first episode, it outrated 3 News, it outrated Campbell Live, it trended globally on Twitter. Why did it create such a storm of dialogue, do you think?
I think simply because it was different. If you look at its content, it was presenting Māori in a new light for many people, including some Māori. And I think the execution too, this type of, reality show isn't everybody's cup of tea. So I think those two things combined probably sent it into overdrive. So.
Are you a fan, Brian?
Well, sort of. See, I'm not normally a fan of reality programs because the main characteristic of reality programs is they have nothing to do with reality. But because I was coming on the program, I actually watched the first 3 programs, and I think it's bloody good, actually. I think it's tremendous. The production values are superb, right? But having said that, your first episode is mostly about half-naked women on beaches. And I would suggest that
Where's
maybe...
the problem with that, Brian?
No, I don't have a problem with that. But nonetheless, I would suggest that's the reason why there was all the controversy and the massive ratings, to start with at least.
Yeah, but I think there are other shows in primetime that actually, have beautiful women in bikinis. I mean, I think at the end of the day, for me, it was about... the representation of Māori in a different light. And I think a lot of people just didn't quite know how to handle that. So
You think you got a lot of opposition from people who were basically snobs and didn't like, po-faced snobs and didn't like reality shows?
You're not including me in that.
Well, one of the things, though, is that I was really keen for people to see it in its totality over 8 episodes and allow the story to unfold. I've got to say that the first episode wasn't purposeful in its sort of attention grabbing. It was just...
What? You sure?
Yeah, no, not at all. It was actually, just episode 1 of 8. So it wasn't purposeful.
Okay, well, tell me something. When New Zealand On Air watched that first episode, what do you think they felt about that? Is that what you sold them when you put in your proposal? Or was that different from your proposal?
No, it wasn't. That's the first thing, is that, as you two would know, is that the story production process is evolutionary, and what happens is often things unfold, whether they be in front of the camera or behind the camera. You learn lessons, and so I think that what was presented to New Zealand On Air and what made it to air was at its heart was the same thing.
I'll tell you why I ask you that. There's an interesting thing when I watched the 3 programs. The first 2 programs are very similar. There is a lot of flesh in those first 2 programs, a lot of sex in those first 2 programs. The third program is quite different, and that's kind of strange. The third program is more documentary style. It's more Māori talking about their whakapapa, talking about their tattoos, all that sort of thing. Yeah. So there was a change there. What was the reason for that?
Well, I suppose that goes back to the question of whether you want to determine culture with a little c or a big C. I mean, quite often, things are deemed as being Māori because they're a Māori language or because they're on a kapahaka stage. At the end of the day, I think one of the things that I'm really sure about is that Māori were a diverse people in 2012, and they're doing really interesting things, and they're wearing baseball caps and they're wearing what they want to do, and they want to choose how they define themselves in 2012. So I think that I'm not too sure whether there was a strategic sea change. It was just that in that particular episode, that was what the content was about.
And it's very different to the image that we see of Māori on Māori TV.
Well, I don't know if it's different to the image on Māori TV, but I think it's different to the generally accepted image. Unfortunately, we sort of sit atop of some pretty bad statistics. And this is a show that, in many ways, you know, and I think as a Fran O'Sullivan, in an article she wrote, she actually said that, you know, for her, it was actually showing Māori in a really positive light. So,
did you advertise for those people, and did you audition them when you'd done that?
We did, and you know,
because not all Māori are as beautiful as that and as handsome as that, any more than all Pākehā would be as beautiful as that and as handsome as that.
No, but
or as sexy as that.
Yeah. But and I don't. The show doesn't purport to be representative of Māori as a whole, but just the slice of Māori. And at the other end of the spectrum, you know, where's the voice of dissent around the negative portrayal of Māori continually.
What I thought was interesting about GC is it put Māori into a context, wider social context. It wasn't all about being Māori, speaking Māori. It was just kids. Well, to me they're kids. You know, in the Gold Coast living normal lives. So, whereas I think if it had been on the Māori television service channels, it would have concentrated far too heavily for a Pākehā audience to follow. I don't know.
I'm not too sure about that because, I mean, I've had, you know, conversations with the management at Māori TV that said they would have programmed it. And, you know, I actually got a text from someone in management, I won't mention his name, at Māori TV, said the only problem with the GC is that it's not on Māori TV.
Yeah. But so you've got a bigger audience. You might have got 20,000 on Māori television, you've got 370,000.
Well, but it's all about timing as well. You know, when I pitched the idea to TV3, and you know, I suppose you have to give real credit to TV3 for taking the punt on the idea.
But these characters aren't entirely pure, are they? I mean, the guys are kind of chauvinistic.
What characters are?
Well, no, they're into one-night stands, you know. One or two of the girls are...
Bill's appalled.
Bill's appalled. He's never heard the term before. And one or two of those girls are not enormously bright. I'm sorry to put this to you, but it's a fact. And maybe that's all a good thing, you know, because they're all equally ambitious, aren't they? That's one of the things about it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the cast have a common thread that they're Māori, other than those that are in relationships with Māori, and they all have their own dreams. So I think that's really...
We saw this week at Māori TV, you know, factoring in more Māori language programs. What's your understanding within the community about, you know, Māori wanting to learn language, grasp their culture, or go to the bright lights of the GC where there's, you know, hot-looking women, lots of money, and you can lead a good life?
Yeah, well...
Why are we here?
Yeah. The boys have just booked their flights to the Gold Coast. What I would say is to the first part is that I think that it's a good move because I think Māori TV, in their act, they have two sort of key groups that they must provide programming for. One is children, the other is language learners. So I think now that move will, I think, better serve the language learners. I think in terms of children's programming, I think in the upcoming months you'll see a much more cohesive.
But can we ever get Te Reo into mainstream television? Can we get that sort of program in prime time? Is that ever going to be possible? Yeah,
well, I did a series for another channel on TVNZ actually, which was One Land, which I think was about 30% Te Reo Māori. And
what was the reaction to that?
Well, it didn't get the same reaction as the GC, clearly. But you know, there's nothing from stopping a couple of the characters on the GC from being Māori speaking. You know, I live in a household where sort of Māoris are the primary language, and I know of families on the Gold Coast, so maybe in Series 2 we'll look at something like that.
We do have to move on to something else that did get a reaction, actually, and Bill, I'm going to talk about this with you initially because I think you'd be an expert on sequin pants.
Yes.
Gold sequin pants in court. Laura McQuillan
Would you
wore
like to
them
stand up, Bill, and show what you're wearing today?
At a trial. There we go. We see them there. They are fantastic. Are they something, though, that would be appropriate, in your opinion, at a murder trial?
Well, probably not, not on the press bench anyway. I mean, she was described as being thrown out of court. Well, she wasn't. She was simply moved from the press bench back into the main body of the court where she could still take notes. I was surprised, actually, they let her take notes in the main body of the court. No, it is inappropriate, and frankly, that's the lobby of Parliament. It's pretty inappropriate for Parliament too.
Bailey, she'd look pretty good on the GC, though, wouldn't she, in those trousers?
Yeah, and this is going to sound rich coming from the producer of the GC, but I think it's inappropriate. And, you know, at the end of the day, as a journalist, I was always sort of taught that you had to wear things that were neutral original and not make yourself stand out or become the story in essence.
And you have to have respect for your environment, don't you?
I think so.
And she had no respect for her environment. That struck me as the main problem here. And she was quite arrogant about it. I mean, she didn't seem to understand why people were complaining.
But if she is moving to the GC, then we'll consider her for Series 2 then if we,
Excellent.
If we get the go ahead. So.
I want to thank you for the subtitles and the GC. It made my life so much easier. I now know what it means to get your creep on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And aunties? You big with the
girlfriends,
aunties?
yeah.
Big with the aunties?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of
Excellent.
that. Got all of that.
It's been an education for Brian Edwards for sure. Bailey Mackey, thank you so much. Brian Edwards and Bill Ralston. Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you all. And that's all from The Nation for today, from me and all of the team. Have a great week.